Every day, you wake up as your own boss, making your own way. Every day, you continue your journey to change the world, your team, and yourself. Every day, you encourage, congratulate, celebrate, and reach toward your goal of being the best and providing the best. The Build Your Best Business Show is for you. The real stories of building a business from other owners and founders along the journey. Find the support and advice you need to successfully start, grow, manage, and exit your business. What are you going to do today to build your best business?
Welcome to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. Build Your Best Business focuses on the entrepreneurial journey. What does it take to successfully start, manage, grow, and exit a business? Today, we're talking with Zach Pousman. He is someone that I've known for years, but I don't think have I ever formally interviewed you?
No, you haven't. This is our first time.
I know. So I feel like I know of you, and I feel like I should know more about you. So I will learn more of that today. So yeah. So he's the founder and CEO of Helpfully. So Zach, thanks so much for joining us for the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here, and I feel the same way about you. I know you. We intersect
know of each
all
other
the time, and we just shake hands at fun events, and then we never get a chance really to sit down and share a drink and
chat,
get to work. Yeah.
So tell me about Helpfully. What is Helpfully, and then we'll get into how the heck you started it.
Of course, yeah. Helpfully is an R&D collective. So we are a network of people that addresses business problems through a design lens. So what I mean by that is we get assignments either from large multinational big company kinds of companies or startups, and I help form and craft and build a team around the assignment.
Got it.
So
okay.
There are many ways that the agency and kind of consulting services are shifting, and I think one of the big touchstones for us was to really think carefully about the right teams for the right projects.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is one of the confusing parts of both that part of it, marketing. You go out to pick someone and then they may be good at one thing, but not so good at something else.
Sure.
And how does that get supplemented? And
yeah, absolutely. And I think the metaphor that I sometimes use is, you wouldn't hire Wes Anderson to direct the same movie as a Michael Bay, or, you would go and get the right people for the job. Mm-hmm. You want to get Werner Herzog to direct this movie, and you want to get, Steven Spielberg to direct that movie. And those aren't wrong or bad choices.
Especially have a very different movie.
But those are very different movies.
Yeah. That's a good analogy. I use house analogies a lot, general contractors. So
I also use...
Yeah, you wouldn't hire a plumber to do your electrical work
Sure.
or whatever, even though they might say, oh, yeah, I could do it while I'm here, but that could be result in a house fire later. So, yeah. So when you say R&D, I immediately think of physical products.
Sure.
So is that right? Or is it other
we stretch into physical and connected products kind of through the Internet of Things. That's one of the places where we focus. No, when I think of research and research and development, or research and development and design, we are focused on understanding people. Okay. Some of our raw sources and raw materials for any kind of new venture and new idea, new product, are the users.
Got it.
And so we do a lot of user research in addition to technology research, or sometimes we do actually need a mechanical engineer or a material scientist or some polymer person to come in and help us, build out an environment or build out an experience.
Okay. Well, in my sort of research background, knowing that no one ever gets to this path directly, tell me, how did you end up here? What did you do before? Did you, what did you want to be? And then when did you end up?
In the distant past, I was a philosophy major in college.
Love it. Lots of English majors, philosophy ends up in this space.
And
for some reason.
And I have spent actually my whole career though in user experience, which broadly speaking is just people and technologies doing better stuff together.
Okay.
So yeah, I was always and forever have been, sort of my perspective on the world is thinking about people and technology. But yeah, I have a more a less technical and a more humanities kind of orientation, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. So you went to school for philosophy, but then where'd you end up?
When I graduated college, it was the .com boom.
Got it.
Many millions of dollars were being spent and wasted in all kinds of fun ways.
It was a fun time.
That was a fun time if you were alive then. But that was a heady time because people didn't know what to make and didn't know what to do, and there were new things happening all the time. And so yeah, my very first job out of college was as a user experience specialist.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Well, during that period, I was working for a company, and we were a consolidation, and the VCs tracked our success based on how much we were spending. So I had 6 months to spend $5 million, and if I spent the $5 million in 6 months,
they would give you another $5 million.
Yes, then I was on track. So we bought laptops for everyone. We put in a phone system.
Sure.
We did all kinds of things. I was a salesperson's dream.
Just call people and just make orders.
Yeah. I loved, at that time, Siemens made phone systems, and I had a rep I'd worked with, and I was like, I really like your phone system, and unless you just screw this up, I'm going to buy a phone system from you.
That is fun. That's really fun.
Yeah. So then transitioning from the .com, because we all got to survive the .bomb, and that's how I ended up creating the research company. So I went from being a technologist to being more of a researcher in that transition. So I fell in love with it more from the other side. I was a technologist, and I saw users struggling with the technology, and I thought it was just amazing to watch them use the thing you had created and it not work, right? And I got into that very strongly. So that was my transition. What did you do during the period of
during the retrenchment?
The retrenchment, yeah.
Yes. During that time, I stayed one foot in technology, but went back to school and got my master's in human-computer interaction.
Got it.
At Georgia Tech. I was really interested in deepening that skill and had that same kind of experience that you had, where the way in which people were so frustrated with the tools and the technologies of the day. Remember when you had to when your phone came with a manual and you got out the manual and you spent, this is not a joke, I mean, people spent many hours learning the tree of functions and features, and then also programming it and moving numbers from your old phone to your new phone.
Yeah.
This was a actual thing that wasted millions of human hours, right? And for a long time, my father-in-law, thought I was just an IT guy. So, I mean, I was the person who...
Well, it transitioned. It went from technology was hard, and you had to,
you needed a
you got to make it work for
person.
make it work for the most people. And then it became technology was easy and the people were hard. Like, how do we make this work for the people? And that's the phase we're in now, which turns some people's brains. They don't understand it.
I think that's right. I think what I've seen in the years I've been in this field is that transition.
Yeah.
The transition from technology is hard and people are hard to now just people are hard.
Yeah.
And technology has gotten far easier. I think, for watchers and listeners of the show, the kinds of things that you can do standing kind of on the shoulders of giants today are just a quantum leap from how much effort was required to build things in other eras.
Yeah, I was advising a company the other day that needed to buy an inventory management system, and the price came back at like $10,000 for the year. Like, that was the licensing fee for it.
Sure.
And they're like, that seems expensive. I'm like, that seems really cheap. I built those. They were like millions of dollars.
Right. You could have spent easily 7 figures on just that one component.
Right.
And that's not the core piece of your business. That's not what you want to focus on.
Yeah, write the check for $10,000. That's a good deal.
Yeah.
So as you're working through today, and do companies identify themselves and come to you and say, we have this problem, we're not sure how to solve it? Like, how are you getting introduced into the world of what you're doing with companies?
Yeah, helpfully sits in that very formative kind of space between the big idea, right, the thing that you'll make,
right,
and the execution.
Okay.
So that 3-step process: idea, step 2, question mark, question mark, question mark.
Right.
Step 3, profit.
Right.
We sit in those question marks, and we help companies navigate
where the magic happens piece, right?
that moment. And I think walk carefully without spending 7 figures, getting themselves from an idea into the world.
Yeah.
So we do certainly, idea generation is part of what we do, and we help companies, hone and craft and make ideas. We also get called on to take a startup who's got a really smart idea, and now they want to extend it, make it real, build something that encapsulates that idea into a business, right? So, and I would say, today's world, because you're standing on the shoulders of so many giants, there are so many choices, too many choices, right? And you don't know where to start, and you really get stuck in the mud sometimes.
Commingling. What do I do? It's like shopping to put all that stuff together.
Right. It is. It is. And without some, some careful thinking about people, well, then anything's a good, anything could work.
Yeah.
I think not all good ideas are good businesses.
Oh my goodness.
Does that resonate?
Oh, absolutely.
That's something.
Do you know how many times I spend time at incubators and things, and I'm like, you have a product.
Sure.
Maybe, but we don't have a business.
And then there are things that I really want to see exist in the world. And I'm like, this is a great thing. If you were to provide that service and this value to people, people would find that very valuable. I'm just not sure you guys will succeed. Your startup can't, I don't know how to unlock that value for you. Right.
Yeah. Or you get a great idea, then they jump the shark, like they do something, and then all of a sudden they start doing something else, and you say, no, I don't look at you that way, and stop trying to solve that problem. It's like the light switch trying to do more for me. I'm like, I just want you to turn the light on and off. I don't really care about the other.
We did some work at Kroger in that space. So Kroger was a client of mine back, and so just finishing up my past. Before I started Helpfully, I was at a few different digital agencies, innovation companies, consultancies as well. And our client was Kroger, and they came and they had that problem of like, we want to do something we don't do now.
Right.
So they sell you groceries. For those of you not in
Atlanta, you have to tell people.
They
don't know what Kroger is, and it's a weird
Northeast,
name.
There are no Krogers.
No.
Kroger's the largest grocery-only chain, number 2 retailer in America, $115 billion last year.
Wow. I may be $1 billion of that, but whatever.
Do they send you the coupons? Because if they're sending you
just
coupons
had the little
in the mail,
card.
the card,
If they send the coupons, it's not in my behavior to use a coupon.
Yeah, mine either.
Yeah.
But Kroger shoppers are very coupon driven. We learned a lot about them. We did shop-alongs, we did ride-alongs, we did a lot of stuff in digital list and digital products and services for them. They wanted to be in health and wellness. They wanted to make this move, right, to extend that relationship with a customer. And as you said, like, I'm not sure I think of you that way. And it just occurred to me, like, I was telling this big multi-billion-dollar company, you have strength here. How do you do something that's honest, that feels on brand, that feels on strategy, and that's technically feasible, and you can actually turn into a real business? How do you do that in a space where they are not, right, necessarily the first person you think of or the first company you might think of?
Yeah. Well, okay, so we'll continue this because you said something a second ago that is different from my experience. Ooh. So I'm curious about that when we come back and talk a little bit about how people come to you and you start to solve problems, like how you help them crystallize their ideas, those kind of things, all right? So we're talking with Zach Pousman.
That's right.
I said I've read it before. I don't have to say it that often. So founder and CEO of Helpfully, you're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw, and we'll be back in just a minute. Congratulations, you're your own boss. Now comes the hard part. It's not just about starting a business, it's about successfully managing and growing that business to an eventual exit. And along that entrepreneurial journey, you're going to run into questions and problems that you need quick answers to. Things like, do you need a business plan? How do you read a balance sheet? How do you talk to an investor? When do you bring on a founder? Or what if you're having problems with your partner?
These are the types of things that you run into as you're trying to grow that business to the next level, and they may not be the things you want to share in public with other people. They're the problems and issues that arise that, as I have experienced along my own entrepreneurial journey, that I needed to have someone I could trust to reach out to and have a conversation and get a different perspective. And it was often those short conversations that would be the thing that moved me from where I was to where I needed to be. It's for that reason I created the On-Demand CXO product offering. On-Demand CXO is something that you can use to have a conversation with a trusted advisor about what's going on in your business. We do a 1-hour phone call to talk about your business, talk about your objectives, and understand what it's going to take to move you from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. From there, you have ongoing access to a Slack channel to ask me questions in private about what's going on in your business so that I can provide some advice or connections to my network to individuals who can help you solve against that problem. You will also have access to my Facebook page, which is full of other entrepreneurs who are along the same journey, to have more broad conversations, things that you trust and would talk about in a networking event. But when you need to go and have that conversation with a trusted advisor, you will have the ability to have a conversation with me in a place that's safe, completely anonymous, and unbiased. I want to see you succeed and build your very best business.
And we're back. You're listening to Build Your Best Business. I'm your host, Eric Holtzclaw. We're talking today with Zach Pousman. He is the founder and CEO of Helpfully, and he and I probably have too much in common in background about user experience, understanding users, how important it is to building your business. Like, if you don't know that about you don't know who your customer or users are, you're going to fail. Like, and that's huge mistakes we see companies make based on making assumptions they shouldn't. So one thing you said in the first round was, people come to us and they've got an idea or a product and we help them crystallize it and then move on to the next thing. Is that true, or do they bring you things that aren't working and you have to fix them? Because that was always my experience.
I would say it varies, honestly.
Varies.
There are people who have...
I always wished they would come to us early. Like, you spend all this money and it doesn't work, like, pow, like, come to us early. We could help you.
We could have helped you frame this better and go out and do research.
And granted, that was, 5 years ago that I was deeply in this. So I'm hopeful, because you and I were talking near the break, that people would understand it's really not about the content or the technology. It's about your person and their context.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way in which people are not rational. So people show us tools sometimes, and I think one of the experiences I have where you're right, people bring us things that aren't maybe quite framed correctly. They just tell us, well, this is, rationally speaking, this is going to be a better mousetrap, a better X, a better experience. This will be, and I look at Google Glass, right? I think it's a great example of a product that is rationally very, very reasonable. People wear glasses, especially white nerds who live in Silicon Valley. And those people could really get more context and more computation, and it would be so helpful to them to get these assistive moments, right, from a computer screen. And then they just didn't. So rationally speaking, this was a smart product idea.
Right.
But that isn't, as we all know, that isn't what happened, and that isn't how people really are.
Yeah. Well, and you
people
would
are
think
a lot more vain than you would give them credit. Even these nerds in San Francisco. That's real.
Too. And I never used Google Glass, so I don't know what the experience was. Did it fade into the background, or was it something that was hard to interact with? Because that's the other thing, that the mistake that people make is technology. We don't really want to use technology.
No, it's the end. It is the means to your end.
Right. I want it to fade into the background. Like, the second I have to mess with it, it's done.
Sure.
It's done.
And trying to change a person's behavior to have...
Never.
Why don't you open an app to turn off and on your lights at your home? It's like, no thanks.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we have Alexa, and we have her turning things off and on, but it works great when it's on schedule. So, like, because there's certain schedules, right? But then let's say she turns off the living room lights in our house at a certain time, and
But you're still watching the movie.
We're still watching the movie.
It's a party. Right. People are over.
Right. Yeah. My daughter kits, and she's like, Alexa's telling you it's time to go to bed. You have a bedtime. So, yeah. So it's sort of thinking about that and what that means.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of value in moving further and further, and my career has really moved further and further right to the right of the brief, right to the right of the assignment itself. So, we're going to make an app, and it will have these features and functions, and it will serve.
And
this
brief is an
customer.
agency thing.
Oh, yeah, it's an agency term. Sorry.
Yeah.
A brief is the set of requirements for an experience. So sometimes, you would call that the requirements doc or the spec if you're in technology world. In the advertising world, they call that the brief. Sometimes also in like product design or industrial design, same. And there are a lot of assumptions and decisions that are in the brief. And you need to go back and actually say, like, are these assumptions true? And what signal did you get to feel confident about that assumption? I tell people that sometimes, you shouldn't be like your 7-year-old who has and hosts and builds a great business around selling lemonade to people for $1 on the street, and then use the signal you got, which was all of your family members and your aunts and uncles and your friends you were with all bought lemonade. You should go into the lemonade business.
Right.
You can take maybe the wrong turn because you've gotten you've interpreted that as real signal. So a lot of entrepreneurs, right? They go to their friends.
Yeah. And that's the
this is amazing.
Big data issue. The interpretation of big data is like, there's this thing, and it's like, well, why? And I got blamed owning the research company that I was a highly qualitative guy, and I am.
Yes, you are.
But I love quant because quant's a smoking gun. So give me something, and I'm going to go either prove it or disprove it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can't do one or the other.
There's a term I really like that by a guy named Madsberg, and he's got this idea called thick data.
Yeah.
So there's big data, which is just voluminous, right? It's going to be a lot of it. But then there are ways to take kind of qualitative work and that more ethnographic kind of work that we were talking about over the break. These perspectives that are in your home, in situ, in the medical clinic. I'm doing some work right now in a medical facility for a large pharmaceutical company, and they want to understand how do these behaviors emerge. That has nothing to do with what's on paper. It has nothing to do with you wouldn't be able to just interview a doctor because he or she would tell you, this is how I do it.
Right.
But that isn't really how they do it.
It's not how they do it. And they look for path of least resistance.
Sure. And there's tons of, there are lots of new technologies, right? And those things are impinging, right, on the ways that those medical teams work. So my main point was, there's big data, but then there is that deep, juicy interpretation, right, of the Google Analytics. And I think people sometimes take Google Analytics like at face value, and instead of asking like these more ponderous, more philosophical, chin rubbing questions about those things.
Yeah. And you and I have both seen the belief that a big data point doesn't mean what they think it means
all the time,
and they work around the system
all the time.
Yeah, it's so much fun to observe and have them tell you something, and then you watch them do it completely differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So talking about the way that you call yourself a collective, which sounds, so tell me a little
fancy.
bit.
Sounds really fancy.
Well, it sounds fancy or sort of like hippie-ish. Sort of think hippie, but
okay.
Yeah, and we're blamed that, right? Ethnography, but we're like a little hippie, right? It's okay.
The softer side.
Yeah, we're like
bongos.
People are important, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So
human beings, they matter.
So when you say that word, you mean you're bringing in talent that's the best in categories to go after a problem?
Yeah, we have a network of talent that we can reach to because every idea is different and every company is different. And when we worked on a project at Kroger and we needed experts in health and wellness, that's very different from the kind of expertise we would need in order to look at the processes and procedures of the ICD-10 codes inside of a medical facility.
Right.
Those are just different analysts. They are different design teams. They are, even different design disciplines.
Yeah.
In some cases, we do a lot of stuff that's very screen-based, so all rectangles. This small rectangle, big rectangle,
right.
On the wall rectangle.
That's all you have is
all are rectangles.
Yes.
So we do a lot of design work in digital ways. But then, of course, in today's world, you've got all of these more sensor-driven or AR and VR technologies. And so when we're working in VR, we hire a different kind of designer and we give that person a different assignment.
Right.
So I think
and you want that like sort of intuitive knowledge.
You do, and
somebody walks in and they go, I just know that's
Sure.
right or wrong based on having worked.
And
in the space.
today's business cycle and today's startup cycle is so shortened and so compressed. Yeah, we're not going to ramp up this person who's a really good graphic designer and then teach him or her everything there is to know about AR or VR. Instead, we can reach into the network and pull just the right design resource.
So in the companies that you're working with, how do you talk to them about that cycle? Because that's a problem I see. It's specifically for big companies that are trying to survive against the startup world.
Sure.
They are planning something 3 years from now, and I'll be in these boardrooms with them talking to them about what they're doing. I'm like, sure, I'll tell you that'll work 3 years from now, but the world won't even be the same in 3 years.
Yeah, right.
Like how do you approach the cycle part of that?
I think that companies have moved into, at least in small pockets, some of the companies have moved into these more agile and lean ways of working that are put the whole team together. Don't wait until you have a perfect idea and a perfect spec until you start to build. How do you prototype on your way? I recommend that they use this sort of these new worlds, right, of using usertesting.com or using Ethnio, a tool I really like to get feedback from your live website. So it's a website intercept, but it goes all the way through to these sort of more ethnographic interviews.
Oh, wow.
It schedules them, it connects you to the people, it gives you this context, and then it's like a nice tool to actually spit out into a user research team. And I even recommend things like 10Rocket. 10Rocket's a local Atlanta company. They will build you the MVP of your idea, at whatever stage it's at, for $10,000 in 10 days.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
10Rocket.
I think I've interviewed them before.
You may have. And they're great guys. And
the name sound, the whole theme sounds interesting.
Sure,
The same, yeah.
Nice framing for them. And what that does is it gets people out of their own way.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we say a prototype is worth 1,000 PowerPoint slides.
Right.
A prototype is worth many, many meetings.
Yeah.
Because it crystallizes, it distills.
Well, and you can put it in front of somebody and say,
yay or nay.
Can you use it? Do you know how to get through it? Do you understand it?
Does it do what
Right.
it says on the tin?
Yeah.
That's right.
And going back to like Ethnio and user testing and some of these others, so my curiosity for you, and I may be setting you up, but the question, the problem with that, the problem that I see, and so I'm curious about, people don't know how to craft good questions. So
I think that's right.
Survey tools, they're like, oh, we'll just put out a survey tool. We'll just do this. And then they ask the wrong question. So engaging experts like you to come in and, that's one of the biggest values of having an outsider to look at it, because
definitely
they ask such loaded questions, multiple answers.
Sure, conflation, right?
Yeah.
Of
you would use this product, wouldn't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
no, yeah. And there are some of the websites of these tools have some guidance and some guides that I think are at least helpful in getting started. I do believe that, and I don't know, maybe we would disagree about this. I believe that any data is better than no data. So when a company is surveying people but shouldn't be using survey instruments, or surveying people with the wrong questions, or doing in-home visits but doing it in a just in a naive way, or a simple way, just a guerrilla kind of way, those teams are coachable, and we can help them, and or they can go and they can get better at that.
Right.
So I would prefer, just in my kind of the design work and the partnerships that I build with these companies, I prefer any data to no data.
No, I completely.
As opposed, some people are like, no, the wrong data is actually leading you in the wrong direction, and now you're going to build a lemonade stand because they told you it was a good idea.
Well, I would say so. Yes, a lot of the times I've walked into boardrooms where they're talking about building something, and I'm like, well, the good news is we're going to get out of the boardroom because we don't care.
The answer is probably not in this boardroom.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're looking around and the table is really nice and there's a big screen behind you and some windows.
Or you happen to be a big company and you're sitting across from an agency that you've got a really nice retainer with, and they
the answer is almost never in that room.
No, it's not.
Unless the tool you're building is for CEOs, in which case it might be.
It is, yeah. And yeah, it's true. Could be. And then I do agree that some data, like one of my favorite examples is when Netflix, and this is going to age me a little bit, but when Netflix went from streaming to the DVD thing,
Yes.
and then they tried to split it into two companies. And I was at some lunch, and they were, I was lamenting about that. I was like, that's ridiculous. They should have done some research or whatever. And they're like, yeah, but research is expensive. I said, you could have run like 3 focus groups for 15 grand, 20 grand. And not because they lost like $25 million in value in one quarter.
And they built that brand, built a website. I mean, they did a lot of work.
Somebody would have said that's a stupid idea.
I feel like there are many cases where things feel expensive, especially, for a startup, for example, where it's like, this is $10,000 to build our MVP. That feels like a big investment. And it's like, imagine being able to throw it away when it's still just paper, or it's still just a concept or a $10,000 prototype, before you spend 7 figures or 8 figures making it real.
Yeah, well, and I saw there's a local paper here that released, somebody raised $1.5 million, and somebody commented on it. They're, congrats, bro, you've made it. No, he raised $1.5 million of somebody else's money, and now he needs to be a good steward of that.
Sure.
And to be a good steward, you need to do some of the things we're talking about, like build the prototype, go out, don't take your investors' money and
just immediately start to scale. Yeah, I think companies go from idea to execution very quickly, and with naive kind of perception of because the idea is good, because people are rational and they're going to buy the thing because it's better, and then you just
because I said so, right?
Because we're going to start building it, and you used to live in that a little bit of an echo chamber.
Yeah. So, and I think we would both say to people, companies like Thinkfully that can take you, and it's not as hard as you think it is to get in front of your customer. It's important to do it.
Definitely.
And you do have the time. So it's not going to delay. I would hear always, you're going to delay us. No, we're not. Just let's do the work.
Let's do this in parallel. I mean, I think there are many cases where, going out, a tool I really like that just launched, and we got to use it for a client recently, is called D-Scout.
Yeah.
So it's one of these new mobile ethnographic platforms. It's $295 to launch a study. You send little emails to your target participants, your friends, 6, 8. You don't need 100. You need 6, 10. And they go through a series of little assignments, little tasks, missions. And the D-Scouts are out in the world. So you're saying, like, next time you're at the store, can you do X, Y, and Z for me? Shoot a video, take a photo, answer this one question.
That's very cool.
And it's $295.
Right.
And yes, you want to ask the best questions you can with the $295 you spent, but that technology used to cost tens of thousands of dollars and was only available to big name consultants or huge companies that could take advantage. Now we've democratized the ability to get into, in this case, it was we wanted to get into the social media sharing behaviors of teenagers. And so we had them take screenshots of all the social sharing that they did and shoot little diaries at the end of the night. Hey, what was going on today in your life? How are things feeling? What's, and they told us these great stories, right? These like social grooming stories that we wanted to see. My client really wanted to get a better sense of what their behaviors were and weren't, and what content they were and weren't consuming, and why.
Yeah.
And so we could just reach out into the world and not and not spend 6 months and $600,000 like learning a lot about people.
Well, and the nice thing about that is the biggest cost often in these kind of things are the recruiting and the incentives, and I mean that's can outstrip the consulting and all the other in a heartbeat. So if you can find these kind of tools and then spend the money on the smart people like you to kind of come in and craft the deal. Yeah.
Or do it yourself. You don't need a smart person. You just get started. I mean,
we're telling you do something. If you're going to build your best business,
by getting out in the world and learning something. And if you spent the $295 and you learned a few things, and then you needed more help or wanted to dig in further, I think one of the things you said was really smart was sometimes companies are asking the wrong questions. I think one thing that we see a lot of also is as soon as you start answering questions, you open the floodgates of how many questions you have. One of the fears that I think founders have, and I think big companies have too, is all of the unknown unknowns, and they're really worried because they know as soon as they bring you that first piece of data, it's like
once you're aware,
your eyes are opened, and you're like, we need to ask a whole lot of more questions.
So the crazy thing for me is we would tell people, somewhere between 18 and 24 interviews is what we need to do, at least to get a starting point. And we'd have
on the ethnography side.
Yeah, ethnography side.
Sure.
And
yeah.
I'd get huge pushback, and we would go, we need to do like 100.
It's small data.
Yeah, we need to do 100 or whatever. And then we would do the first one. And the person, like the project sponsor, would say, "Oh, we got to start changing everything." I'm like, I'm not even convinced at this point we need to change everything. We talked to one person. Like, let me go talk to at least the others, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that kind of thing of like, don't worry too much about that. But
any data is good data.
Any data is good data.
That's just a belief. I mean, and I think other people might feel differently, but I think as soon as you start on that journey, and as you said, your eyes become open and you start to think about, oh wow, am I really building the right thing? The faster you can get yourself and the cheaper you can get yourself to that question, the better.
Yeah.
So that was true for Kroger. That's true for all my clients.
Yeah. The other thing I loved is when we would get done, we would hand the report over and the customer would tell us that we had just sold them common sense. Well, if it were common sense, why weren't you doing it?
Sure. So
anyway,
I think but let's talk about just one last point about that. It's just in terms of ethnographic perspectives and things. It's like, people are busy, right? This would potentially be this finding, and people are like, well, we know that moms are busy. We know that teens are busy, and especially in today's world, they're overscheduled. People are feeling very overscheduled. It matters a lot the ways in which they are busy and what they are busy about and who they are busy with. Those are where the magic of your solution to a real pain point lie. Of course, we're all busy, and that is common sense. But the uncommon sense is in this doctor's practice or in this mom's life, how would she use Kroger differently, or how would this doctor change her prescribing behavior?
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
Cool little, I love what you do, and it's perfect and helpful for every business. Every business needs to understand their customer better, and it's a part that they say, but they don't always do so well.
That's why we're called Helpfully.
I like it.
Just trying to help people.
Yeah. Zach Pousman, he is founder and CEO of Helpfully. I've been your host, Eric Holtzclaw. Thanks so much for joining us. And what are you going to do until next time? Maybe go talk to your customers, ask them a few questions, even if they're bad, to build your best business.